set your camera and that.
No, it's just people walking. Oh, it's the house is too small if I can come there. Yeah, no, I got that. No, I got all that. Welcome to my channel, Ghosts, Vampires, and Scandals of New Orleans. This is your host, Bobby Bogdan, and in tonight's episode, we're going to talk about Madame Delphine Lalaury's house over there. Evil woman. She purchased this land together with her husband in year 1831, and in the record time of only 6 months, they built the big monstrosity you see over there. This was very fast, especially for those days. As soon as the house was completed, Madame Lalaury started to ostentatiously display her wealth any chance she could. She did it by throwing all these big, lavish, elegant parties at least once a week, serving no fewer than 100 guests each time, with the best of imported gourmet foods. Cheeses and wines from France, the most expensive truffles of Italy, the most expensive musicians of New Orleans, with very elegant dancing in the salon downstairs. And all these wild, crazy, but elegant parties went on like this for about 2.5 years. But 2.5 years later into it, it all came to a sudden end. When in the middle of one of these big parties, there's a small fire that starts in the kitchen downstairs. And in typical New Orleans fashion, the entire party simply shuffles out onto the street. They occupied that entire block. We're talking here about all 100 guests, with the tables, with the food on them, with the drinking, with the puking, with the opium smoking, with the yelling and the dancing and the musicians. As we say here in New Orleans, laissez le bon temps rouler. Let the good times roll. Party on, baby, it's New Orleans. Party on. Also in typical New Orleans fashion, it took the firemen about an hour to arrive at the scene. So fast forward, it's about midnight by now. They're able to step inside the kitchen, but in that heavy smoke, they found an old slave woman chained up by her wrist to the stove, a very heavy metal chain. She was almost about to die of smoke inhalation. In broken English, she tells the firemen, "It was I who started fire. Also I who chained myself up to stove because I did not want to have temptation to run away. I wanted to make sure I die and I kill everybody else in house. I get it. Penalty for this is hell. But I okay with it because I know hell is better than what this place has been." What? The fireman said incredulously. How could hell be a better place than any place on earth? Especially than this gorgeous, beautiful house, they said. And she hesitated, but finally it told them, well, go to 3rd floor. Hell is there. So they went there, but it took them another half an hour to break through those heavy locks and chains on that door. Once they finally stepped inside, they saw the horrific torture in there. And what we're talking about is right on the other side of that door, 2 hospital beds with 2 people on them, we believe husband and a wife. And on one of the beds, there was a little bit of thread and a very dull scalpel. Both were bloodied up. The newspapers 2 days later called this entire scene there a very cruel, very crude sex change operation. Mind you, it had been performed way before the advent of modern medicine. Apparently, Madame Lalaury only used that very dull scalpel to carve out, to remove all the private body parts of each person, and has sewn those body parts onto the other person's body by only using thread. Of course, those 2 people did not survive that procedure. The firemen stepped in a little further, against the wall. They saw an old slave guy tied up to the wall like this, barbed wire against his neck and also against both of his wrists. He was still breathing, so they were happy to hear him alive. But this was in the middle of the night. We had not invented electricity and light bulbs, so of course it was really dark in there. They couldn't see very well until they finally approached him, and now face to face, just a few inches away from his face, with the help of that dim moonlight filtering through the window, the firemen realized that actually this guy was not so fine. He had absolutely no skin left on his face. Madame Lalaury had peeled it all off, and now there were hundreds of maggots eating at the flesh on his face, crawling up and down his face. The only thing that kept him alive were those maggots, because you see, they were also eating at the bacteria that otherwise would have infected him and would have killed him. As disgusting as this sounds, those maggots saved that guy's life. The firemen stepped in a little further. Second guy, tied up to the wall like the first one. This guy was already dead by now, for good reason. because unfortunately Madame Lowry had drilled a big hole inside of his skull. Not only that, had left a fork and a knife in there. She had been literally, quite literally, picking at his brains. And we speculate nowadays that maybe she was serving those brains to her guests as a delicacy, telling them all kinds of lies that was some imported fancy food. Of course, because if they knew what it was, they wouldn't have touched it. She had drilled that hole inside of his skull literally by hand, manually, because we had not invented any power tools by then, or electricity for that matter. In the middle of the room, on this beautiful Persian carpet, the firemen saw a small box, tiny enough to have inside a couple of cats inside, maybe a small dog, mid-sized dog at the most. They heard all these noises from inside the box. They wanted to liberate this animal. They started kicking really hard at that box. It finally shattered a few minutes later. Well, what they found in there, once the box shattered, unfortunately, no cat, no dog, but instead, a fully adult, fully grown slave woman. The only reason she fit inside that tiny box is because Madame Lowry had broken every single bone in her body, every few inches apart. And because of this, was able to reshape this woman's arms and legs in such weird, contorted ways that the newspapers 2 days later called this woman a crushed human pretzel. A crushed human pretzel. The firemen stepped in a little further. Finally, at the other end of the room next to a wall, they saw a teenage girl. 15, 16, we don't know for sure, but a teenager nonetheless. As soon as they were right next to her, they realized, again, with the help of the moonlight coming through the window, they realized she was absolutely fine. She had no wounds, no scars, nothing wrong had been done to her. They couldn't believe their eyes. They threw their arms in the air. "Thank you, God," they said. "We're happy the girl is fine." But not only that, she's a witness. Thanks to this girl's testimony in the courts, the judicial system in the near future will be able to prosecute Madame Lowry, maybe even give her a life sentence in prison. So very happily, the firemen started unstrapping the girl from her bonds. Well, there's a problem. It's very likely that that girl was born in that room and only lived in that room her entire life, witnessing all this torture day after day after day.